Hi. Hi everybody. My name's John Byde, and a few years ago I was working on a large building project in Swindon, the refurb of Nationwide House, where I was a site draftsman, and the building was very dirty, so it needed cleaning. And so I researched water. I started to research water and found Victor Schauberger, good old Google, and thereby hangs a tale. But so what I'm talking to you about tonight is Implosion, which is developed by Victor Schauberger from his study of water and natural phenomena. He was a forester, Austrian, and he didn't have a classical education, although his family did, so he didn't go to university, so he's off to a flying start because he didn't have any preformed ideas about how things might work in terms of physics. So really on here I've got a bit of a joke, you know, I've got the universal Om equals mc squared, but underneath, when I was thinking about this in terms of physics and how we develop things, we develop laws, and the laws of thermodynamics were developed 100 years ago for steam engines. And Victor is all about cold energies, and all the energies we've been using up to press are hot, expansive, masculine energies. And those energies are what nature uses to take things apart. If she wants to take something apart, she heats things up. That's the expansive energy. And if she wants to really drive something and build energy, she uses spirals in water, in rivers, hurricanes, tornadoes. We'll see that as we go along. So what Victor did, I mean, that's why I put on the bottom, sorry, I was going to explain that, is I wrote the fourth law of thermodynamics, which you can see on the bottom, which is basically don't mess with the top three or you don't get your funding next year. So Victor was a complete free thinker, and he was a forester. He was trained forester, so was his father, so was his grandfather. And they used to fell trees, stick them in the river and float them down to the mill. But he noticed things while he was doing this. He noticed that the logs floated better on some occasions than others. And that depended on things like the full moon, or the phase of the moon, and the temperature of the water. And the temperature of the water is controlled to a great extent not just by the shade of the trees, but the spin that goes down the river and laterally. We'll come on to that. So this is about all the shapes that we use to drive things like propellers, turbines, turbine bottom left, big propeller for a ship, aeroplane propeller. They're all based on one very fundamental shape, and that's the sycamore seed. And what the sycamore seed is designed to do is not accelerate a fluid, which is really what you want to do if you want to move something through the air. It's designed to brake it, B-R-A-K-E. So the shapes we're using are all wrong. They're all designed to brake or slow down a flow because they're designed on the sycamore seed. So what are the shapes? Well, this is an illustration really of the same shapes. One is accelerating from the inside out, which is centrifugal, which is a representation of our energies that we're using now. On the other side, it's radial axial acceleration of fluids, and that's how the vortex works. That's how hurricanes work, how tornadoes work. All natural running shapes work. And you can get all this information from, some of these are cribbed from Victor's books, Living Energies and the Energy Evolution and books like that. And that's another illustration of the same thing. I can't read it. Can't read it from here. Not showing up on mine. Can I wander around with this?
Or a pointer?
Yeah, or a pointer would be helpful, yeah. Oh, thanks. Excellent.
Just lean forward, you can get in there.
Do you just switch on? So, let me move this thing around. So the shape is, the acceleration is got a plane at infinity. That's the plane at infinity. And you've got a point at infinity. So the shape goes from here to here to here to here, and that's the 0 point. I suppose if you like, you could call it the shape of a black hole, a galaxy, anything you like, but you've got a counterbalance on the other side, so things pop in and out to do with shape. But that's the 0 point. So that's the acceleration, that's slow running, and as it goes down here, it's like an ice skater pulling her arms in. And we'll show that in a minute anyway. We'll go on to the next slide. So Victor had these ideas. He was studying the rivers, and in Austria mainly, and they had a lot of land that they couldn't easily reach. To drive a road in was very expensive. So what they wanted to do to extract the timber is put them down flumes, and most of the flumes in the past were either triangular shaped or square shaped, but they weren't conducive, as Victor knew, to how water likes to run. And there was a prince, the Prince von Lippe. He'd lost most of his money at the gambling tables in Monaco, but his wife was pretty clued in. She'd heard about Schauberger. She said to him, she made him an offer. She said, look, if you put up half the money, we put up half the money, we'll share the profits if you believe in your ideas. So he built a log flume, and the shape of the log flume was built on the egg shape. So this is all the maths. Sorry, this is upside down, but basically what we're interested in is this part here. So you've got an egg shape, classical egg shape. Egg again is, well, the egg's the inverse of a hyperbolic, and the shapes we've been looking at are called hyperbolics. That's the shape the water makes when it goes down your plug hole. And the mathematical inversion of that is the egg. So the other thing about the egg, it's conducive to spin. It's got no square sides, so it's going to spin. So he built all his log flumes with the pointy end of the egg down, which you can see on the shadow there quite clearly. Oh, that's a bit tight, that, for the shape. And when the engineers were building it, they said, where are we going to put it? Where do we go? What's the survey? And he said, well, the river knows best. Follow the line of the river. So there's a few things that are happening here. It's not just the spin in the log flume, it's how it's moving as it goes down the river. And if you've ever watched water run down your shower screen, it never goes straight down, it's always doing a dance. And the reason it's doing that dance is it wants to close the circle. That's what it wants to do, but it can't because it's being driven by gravity, so it does the next best thing. So you get to wiggle down your shower screen, and you get to wiggle down a river valley. That's why you get oxbow lakes, because it kinks out. So he designed it this way, and he built several of them in the end, because as you could probably guess, it was rather successful. To break it, well, to make a good profit, they had to get 1,000 cubic feet of timber down the log flume a day. And there's quite a lot of story about it. It was quite a tense time for him because there was a lot of pressure against his ideas from conventional hydrologists and people who are looking after rivers. And because he was so way out there, his ideas were so unusual. So they're all ganging up on him, hoping it would fail. But it didn't. So the first day out, they got 1,400 cubic meters, so he got his money back. He did rather well at it. One of the things, though, that he missed, when they opened the sluice, which was the day before, to test it, they put a log in, which is heavier than water, such as larch, or I can't remember the other sort. And obviously, in normal circumstances, they won't float down the river, because they're not buoyant. But if you control the spin and the density of the water, they are. And what I mean by the density of the water is the anomaly point of water. It's got many anomaly points, but one of the major ones, and most people know, is 4 degrees centigrade. Water is at its densest. That's the reason why there's life on Earth, because if it froze at zero, everything would freeze from top to bottom. But because water is at its densest at 4 degrees, it sinks, so it doesn't freeze. So it's self-insulating. They had to have a holding pond, and this is a sectional view, sorry, a plan view of the holding pond. The water had come in here, and when the visitors were watching this, they said that's too thin, you can't allow it, it just won't hold the water, it's not strong enough, because when you let all that water rush in there, it's going to wash everything away. So Victor said no, it won't, and he stood here. And he fired his gun twice to open the sluices, and this 3-foot wall of water came down, went into the pond, and what it did when it came in is it spread, as you can see. As soon as it met the other side, it rolled round to meet each other. Then this water folded back on itself to meet the incoming wave and took all the energy out. When they did the calculations with that in mind later, it was 12 times stronger than it needed to be. Then you'd let the water settle, and you get striation, or you get thermoclines. You get a separation in water temperature, warmest at the top and the cooler water at the bottom. So what he did was his draw came up from the bottom to the log flume to start the spin. And this water, of course, coming from the bottom and not the top, which most do, is cooler, so it'll be more buoyant for whatever's floating in it. Anyway, I forgot to mention, but he did a test run the day before on this, and he put a log in, went through, didn't work, and he was a bit miffed about that because it was due to open the next day, and he went to sit on the side of the pond, and as he did so, he sat on something which was a snake, and he picked it up quickly and threw it in the pond. And as it landed, he watched the way it moved, and it moved in a very particular sinuous movement. If you've ever seen a snake, that's how it swims. And then he knew it was missing from his log flumes. What was missing from the log flumes was rifling on the bends. So you want to spin that way on that bend and a spin that way on that bend. And these are two sectional views of that area and that area to show you the spin. So if this was a river, you'd get deposition silting this side, and you'd get erosion on that side, and as it continued, you'd get an oxbow lake, and then it would, depending on the slope. So he hired his men. He said, "I'll pay you treble time," and they nailed large laths on the bends all night long. All you could hear was the hammering of nails to get these spirals on, and of course it worked. So the water, you could now make it spin. So the shapes we're interested, well, he's interested in, and I am, come to that, is, well, this is, in a river, there's many vortices. Some are across the river, lateral, and some are longitudinal. This is a profile view of a river in the best circumstances, so like a high mountain river or a natural running river. I'm discriminating here because what nature does is control the temperature of the water. What we do is we fell all the trees, let the sun on it, it warms up, and the river goes like we do, gets sluggish, it drops out its silt, and then you've got to dig it out again. And one of the reasons you've got to do that is you've changed all the natural geometry of the river. You've lost the power to control the temperature and the temperature gradient, so as it warms up, it dumps its silt, so you've got to dig it out. And they think, oh dear, what we need is a nice triangular shaped channel. So as you fill up, you get more water volume and send it straight to the sea. That's what you've got to do. But if you do that, you destroy the whole energetic structure of the surroundings, all of it. It takes, I don't know how long it takes, but it takes a long time to rebuild from nature those energies, those subtle energies. If it was Wilhelm Reich, he'd be calling it orgone. It's a living energy because of the shapes that are generated as it spins. But in this, you've got laminar flow, which is set up, so this outer band is warmer than the inner band, but not by much, just a few tenths of a degree. But as water cools, it gets denser, and as it gets denser on the same slope, it accelerates. So this water in the middle is accelerating down the river, drawing in more water behind, is the way it would work. And it does a lot of things. There's subtle energies become involved in this, and it's a generative flow. We'll see in a minute, or we'll talk about it. So that's more of a plan view or an isometric view of what's going on in a river. And what he's talking about here is this slow build-up. Which way is it going? Sorry, the other way. Where's it going that way? It's probably flowing towards us. So it's building up to this point. And this has probably gone on for several sequences as it goes in the river, but actually you find a ford. And that's the ford here. So what it does is wind up one way, and then it unwinds the other. Before it changes direction, it dumps all its sediment at a ford. When it does that, energy or subtle energy shoots out into the land either side, and then it'll wind up again. And he remembers this because he studied rivers, so he designed his machines to function on this sequence, which is, well, it's called, he calls it very well, the energy cannon there. And you can see just channel profile. But if you want to learn more about this, you can have a look at Living Energies. And he's just drawn a simple profile of the river, which is fairly obvious. Silting up on the inside, erosion on the outside, deeper channel here. But the thing he also noticed was if you maintained the natural shapes in the river, which nature does automatically, there's a good reason why it's twisting and turning. That's why he built the log flumes the way they do. And our hydraulic engineers build them straight, and then they wonder why we get flooding. The reason you get flooding is you're not managing the shapes. They just don't have a clue. And the other thing he said is if it's a natural flow, with the way it's developed, with the trees lowering the temperature of the water and the spin, that river, no matter how much it rains, will never flood, ever. Never, ever flood. And what have we got now? So there's a few more drawings of sectional views of the river. It's called a velocity curve, this, but it's the same sort of thing. Denser water at the bottom accelerating, sluggish water on the top. But because you've got different layers, you get transverse eddies. If you didn't have these eddies working against the flow of the river, it would shoot down to the sea and strip out all the material in between. That's why water's magical stuff. It wiggles. So this is an illustration of the transverse vortices. You get these on wingtips, which you'll see later, and they call it parasitic drag. Actually, it's lift in the wrong direction, but we'll have a look. So they're just curling back on themselves, as you see. You can do that with drawing your spoon through your coffee cup with a bit of top. Same thing, but that's a braking force, and that's a good thing because it's building energy and it's slowing the flow of the water. When rivers are badly managed, you get odd things happening. You get odd spins, erosions, little shapes happening which are not good. If you get the shapes right, it'll self-regulate. So he started to take these ideas and apply them. And this is called his breathing pipe. It's called his breathing pipe because it's made of wood. He used to carefully select it. So it was grown naturally in the ancient forest, probably of larch. I'm not sure if it's larch, well, conifer anyway. And he put these fins on to encourage spin. That's another. This one pertains to this idea, which is open channel, but what you can do is encouraging spin and what's called a lemniscate flow, which is like a waltzing moment. This one's spin, but this is a way of purifying water. So if you wanted to purify black water, for example, you could put it through this pipe, and the pipe would be up to 30 meters long with these silver-coated fins, and it would be pure when it came out the other end. I'll just have a look just to show what's going on in that, because now we're just sort of applying some of his ideas from what he found from the log flumes. So you've got your silver fins encouraging a flow, which you can see the shape of there as it goes. And you've got the vortex in the middle, which is spinning down the middle with the dense water. But the funny thing, when you get spin, or you spin any fluid, you get you not only get temperature separation, you get a charge separation. So you've got negatives in the middle and positive on the outside. The other thing this represents is that there's more oxygen on the outside, around here, where the silver veins are, and the bacteria that are going into the water spin out to the outside because they're denser, and they're nearly all anaerobic. So now they're in an oxygen-rich area, so they get killed off. So that's a very solution. He also used this to transport ores, and as they were going down that, they were processed as part of the process, because I forgot what they call it. I can't remember the name of it, but oxygen's introduced to the mineral as it's transported, and even going down the slope, it won't touch the sides. Go down the middle. So some rivers get a bit sick, you might say. So this is called an energy body, and what it is an anchored or tethered egg shape. And when the water flows around the egg shape, it generates this spin, which you'll see lots of. We'll see other shapes in a minute. You see this dip at the top, that's telling you that flow is accelerating, not decelerating. It does build up again, but it allows you to do, if you want to manage your river, or you've got erosion on a bank, or you want to get things moving again, you can put in an egg, and that would change the rate of flow and the direction of flow, put it back on course really, give it the message of what you want it to do. And I was saying earlier, the machines we use at present, with one of these funny propellers on the front, which I call cavitation screws, because as it accelerates, it gets more drag, gets more noisy, and uses more energy. So the opposite must occur somewhere, if you get the shapes right. But anyway, same thing with the wing. The wing really is a static propeller. Obviously it's not spinning, but the air is. And the reason the air spins is because you've got high pressure on top, low pressure underneath, and they meet at the wingtip. Now, this is a crop sprayer, so it's under very heavy wing load. It's just come down and pulling out. So you're under massive wing load, and you get the mixing of the air. And where have we seen that shape before? Look familiar? Yeah? It's everywhere. Yeah, that's right. It is, it is. It's phi. So this is other illustrations. This could be the top of your coffee when you pull your spoon through it. As it happens to be, this is probably 500 miles from there to there, and it's a satellite image from space. I don't know which islands they are, but they were named, von Karman discovered them, so obviously they're named after him, so they're the von Karman vortex streets. And you get a particular pair rotating in opposite directions, then you get another pair over here, another pair over there, like footsteps at the start of the turbulent or the bluff body that's in the fluid flow. We'll talk about that a bit more later. I'll just go back a bit. I've got some of my slides a bit mixed up here, but this is at low speeds. Anyway, obviously, I don't know, 50 miles an hour winds. But if you increase this to a huge degree, you get cavitation on the downside, on the downstream side. And cavitation is a very interesting subject. Well, it interests me, because what the engineers do, when we have a look at the propellers earlier, they experiment with the shapes to try and engineer out something they can never engineer out, which is this cavitation. Because what happens is the fluid goes past the body and accelerates. It reaches the vapor point of the fluid, whether it's air or water, creates a bubble, which downstream then has to collapse, because nature abhors a vacuum. And if that happens fast enough, then you get a squirt back which hits the metal and puts holes in it, and it starts eating away your propeller. But as we know from Flashman and Pons, you can use that using microwaves to actually create energy. And where did they go? Some of the shapes. Now what we're doing here, or what he was doing, a Schauberger, on different frequencies, the classic one is called the kudu horn. And what you've got here is a pipe that's got a curve in it, or a twist in it, and that's also got another twist going up it in frequency with the long twist. So you've got a twist with a twist. A bit like a helter-skelter, but in the helter-skelter you'd be doing a rotation every time you went round the bend. The other one's I think it's called I know it's a Wurlitzer or the octopus. They have chairs in it and an arm, and sometimes you get flung out as you go on the outside. Sometimes you do nothing, and then all of a sudden it'll fling you out. There you're in frequency with two things, the rotation on your spot and what you're orbiting around, and then you really, really go. And if you design around that, that's when you get 0 point of free energy, or what he called self-accelerating flows, which sounds remarkable, but we'll have a look at some hard facts in a minute about that. And these are just other illustrations of shapes, which we all know and love. Profile view of a hurricane, the wall of a hurricane, which looks very like the skirt of one of his repulsins. which we'll go into in a minute. Is this working? That's the plan view of a hurricane. Again, I was saying before, if you notice the shape off the wingtip of the aeroplane, now you've got something, I don't know, 2,000 miles across, same shape. Nature does this with no moving parts. Look at the swirl in the water. There it is again. And there we go to light years across, similar shape. Self-organizing flows. And these are just some of the illustrations from the book. One we'll be looking at in a minute is this one. It's called the kudu horn. And the kudu is an African antelope. But the reason he liked it is it starts off big, goes narrow, and it's twisted, and the whole thing twists, which is the flowing movement that water likes. How he discovered it, I don't know. He's a very intuitive man. But he had some very unusual experiences while he was making his discoveries, because he looked very carefully at nature. There was one occasion he was hunting ibex up somewhere up in Austria, near his, high up in the mountains in winter, and he winged one. Didn't kill it, so he was tracking it, and he knew where it would go. It would go back to a spring, a natural spring where he knew the source of, and he knew it'd go there. It'd go there for two reasons: either for a painless death or to recover, because of the energies around that spring. So when he was tracking it, it actually fell in a gorge, and in that gorge there was a frozen pond at the foot of a waterfall. So he collected his, I forgot what they're called out there, his goat or whatever it is. But what he got interested in was happening at the base of the waterfall, because when he looked in the waterfall, there were logs in there, which usually are lying level, but this time they're all standing on end doing a little dance around the foot of or near the base of the waterfall. When he was watching some of them, they came to the surface, got a rim of ice on, and then sank again. And he was trying to figure out what was going on here. But what was more unusual was that there was some objects he could see doing a dance in the moonlight on the bottom 12 feet down. They started to rise as well. And they were egg-shaped. There were others, as it turned out, there were rocks, and they floated up to the surface, got a rim of ice, and then went back down again. He knew there were rocks because he pulled one out and had a look at it. The other shaped rock, same material, didn't rise. They just stayed on the bottom. So obviously there's something in the shape of an egg. This is some of the machines he was starting to develop early days. They've all got the same principle, which is an in-winding flow or a twist with a twist, to get a self-accelerating flow. I'll just put this in because it looked so similar to me, one of the crop circles, to one of his early trout turbines. Water would go in here, it would start to spin around here, get tighter and tighter and tighter, and this part is going away from you by, on the same scale, probably a couple of feet. So you've got to spin, and three of them, you like threes. And that's another example of an in-winding flow, zipping up the DNA. And this is another derivation. I've mentioned Theodor Schwenk here because he did so much work. He wrote a book on flows, and also possibly how heart systems work in insects, and they're all controlling vortices. They do it with no moving parts, but they do it by encouraging, well, you'd call them smoke rings, but they're like rotating rings of fluid, and the central fluid goes through them. So it self-accelerates. And this one on the left is by John Wilkes, or a derivation of his, and these are called flow forms. And you get the water flowing out, and it'll do a dance, and that's called a lemniscate. So it's doing a figure of 8 in here. And water loves this. It generates, it cleans itself, it generates energy, or subtle energies, we've got to call them. And things love growing around them. The other thing is, if you get the orientation of them right, they'll work better, just as some rivers work differently depending whether they're flowing north, south, east or west, to do with the energy and the magnetic field of the Earth. Or better, well, better, worse, depends how you look at it. And something Schauberger came up with, which always interested me, still does, kind of fascinates me. He calls it the three forms of planetary motion. This one's orbit, one form, and you'll notice he's doing it on a line. pointing out earlier, we're not stationary in space. I mean, if you look at a plan view, it looks like you're just doing a circle. But if you look at our solar system edge on, it's actually a spiral or a bunch of spirals on this frequency. So that would be the, I don't know, 240 years of Pluto, or is it Neptune? And this whizzy one in the middle will be Venus, then it'll be Earth and Mars, all in the different frequencies, Jupiter. But that is a sort of a one cycle span of the longest orbit of whatever it is, Pluto. But what you get is this pattern, or something similar, which looks like a coil to me. It's quite an interesting idea to conjure with, because it'd be interesting to wind a coil on the same frequency, pulse it with the planetary energies, and see what comes out here. But anyway, that's orbit. Spins on its axis, or wobbles a bit, as ours does, and you generate circulation. So the circulation is electromagnetic field around the planet. Spin, orbit. Orbit, spin, circulation. And he applied that to his water. There's another thing that he also was very interested in. This was an experiment done by Lord Kelvin a long time ago. And you've got two fine jets of water. And you've got a collector here. And it links to this collector at the bottom. So that one connects to that one connects to that one. And depending how energized the water is, you'll get a spark. You can arc a spark across. And how many times it flickers or arcs, or how far it'll arc, tells you how energized the water is. So probably in a London water, you'd be lucky if you get a... But high mountain stream water, you get a constant arcing just from the spin in the water. But the droplets spin naturally, as rain does. It doesn't fall in a direct lump. It spins. It is always spinning. When it spins, as we saw before, you get a charge separation. So you get posy and neggy. And that's how we get thunderstorms, basically, is the spin of water in space, and also the capacitance field in the different air strata, a bit like the river. This is a design for a water sprinkler, because if you encourage the charge of water, if you pour in your water straight out of your tap, Schauberger would call that a water corpse. If it's coming out with straight water, straight pipe, it's dead water. So if you spin it before you water your plants, especially with copper things or a copper watering can, and spin it, you'll energize the water. You'll probably get up to a third more growth in the same season as if you're using the water straight from the tap, because you've re-energized the water. And if you're using well water, that's all the better, because it doesn't have chlorine in it, or fluoride. I'm not going to spend long on this, but he called this the terrestrial biocondenser. And that's the Earth, and these are the layers of atmosphere. There's a dielectric around the Earth, like a capacitor. And that's what Tesla was interested in as well, with his Wardenclyffe device and other devices, because he knew the Earth had a pulse. And we know the Earth's got a pulse from the lightning strikes because of what goes on at Giza and the Schumann resonance. But you can look this up if you're interested in it. I won't go into it. I don't fully understand it myself yet, but it's absolutely fascinating, because one of the things it draws up, or you can think about, is how HAARP's working and how it's bouncing off different layers, or how if you can create one short through that, you can gain a massive amount of energy from this biocondenser, feed it back in, focus it, and that will focus back into the Earth. So they're saying they're using millions of watts. I don't think you need to use millions of watts. I think you use quite a small amount of wattage, so long as you harness the power as you short out this condenser and feed it back in. You'll get quite a big bang for your bucks. But this is because I got very interested in the charge in water, and I didn't have any instruments to measure it. So what's going on here is that's a clothes peg, and that's about 1 millimeter across. And this is a brass sheet. It's not earthed or anything. And the water's just squirting out under quite high pressure from mains pressure onto this brass sheet. And you get this color separation. I haven't seen this done anywhere else before, but there's a pal of mine is a master armourer. He makes suits of armour. And I showed him this picture. He said those are the same colour separations as you get when you heat treat steel. So you get from straw colour, which is the cooler temperatures, up to peacock blue, which are the higher temperatures, if it was steel. And what I wanted to know is why you're getting the colours, where they're coming from. But from some of the other experiments I've done, and some of the pictures I'll show you, and also what Showie did, was that the higher the spin, the higher the charge separation. So here you've got almost a laminar flow, except where the impact is. So you haven't got a huge charge separation, but the edges, you've got surface tension, and it rolls back on itself. So it's spinning down here. And if there's any turbulence, you'd get colour down here as well. So this is just showing you that from one jet of water, there's no turbine blade in there, it's just squirting out. It's spinning as it goes, which it's hard to see, but obviously it shows that's spinning, but so when it hits this, it comes to the edge and spins. Higher the spin, higher the colour. It's also very pretty, so that's why I called it the feather. And that goes for any fluid. It doesn't have to be water, it could be air. And if it was in the air, and you were a bird, and you could manage these micro vortices and understood biologically that you could separate the charge out, then you've got a dielectric and you've got a charge, then maybe you're floating, you're just rowing through the air. And if you've ever watched a pigeon take off, when it takes off, it has a very particular movement with its wings. And they clap at the top, you'll often hear them clapping. When they clap and they bring it down again, they're creating a vortex above them, which spins at a high rate of knots, and as they come down they're also moving up, but they've created a partial vacuum above them. Nature hates a vacuum, so something's got to fill it, so it does. So then it rises in the air, and then it's in straight and level flight, and it's managing the micro vortices as they flow over its feathers. Sorry about that. It's gravity for you. As it flows over its feathers, and it gathers all of them. Get a feather and have a look. It's got this complex curve. It curves one way and curves the other. It's also got lots of striations on it. And that's what I think it's doing. I haven't seen it anywhere. I'm just kind of guessing. And from what Schauberger just said, one sentence on that, which really got me thinking. He said, birds don't fly, they're flowing. And he also said, the heart isn't a pump. Well, he didn't quite say that. He said, the heart isn't a pump, it is pumped. And what he was saying is, it's got nothing to do with a pump. The heart is definitely not a pump. And the reason I could say that is I'll show you a picture at the end. There's a guy who's done amazing research on this called Frank Chester, and it's all about managing vortices, basically. And in the right ventricle, the blood comes in and circulates anti-clockwise, and what that right ventricle is designed to do is actually slow the blood flow down because it's going too fast. That sounds counterintuitive. In the left ventricle, it's then accelerating in a clockwise flow, and it's being thrown out like a potter's wheel. So it's working more like a resonator than it is a pump. And I'd say that, I mean, to illustrate, it's pretty simple. The bottom of the heart is 3/32 of an inch thick. It's its thinnest point. And you've got 20,000 miles of capillaries in your body, and you've got a semi-viscous fluid. You'd have to have something weighing about 1/4 of a ton, impacting something about 3 inches diameter to get it 10 miles down a capillary. So it cannot be working as a pump. There's no way it's working as a pump. It's a regulating valve, a regulating system. This is what Schauberger knew, and recently, last few years, he was Steiner educated as a sculptor, as Frank Chester. He also developed from his researches the sixth platonic solid, which is really, I mean, to do that is phenomenal. Well, I'll show you the picture at the end, but it's not really what the talk's about. So that's the picture of the flow out from a water jet. And what I got interested in is I built my own little vortex generator in my back garden out of Coke bottles, and I had a spin going in at the top, go down the bottle. Now I might be able to load on here the film of it. And I wanted to see what the pattern was coming out at the base, where the water spins out the base, because we've just seen the feather. So this was underneath a vortex for about 25 hours, and that's the shape it made, which is showing whatever the charge differential is, which you can see there's not a lot, which I haven't explained yet to myself, so I'm not quite sure why that is. But I didn't have any sophisticated instruments, and I really wanted to see more about what's going on inside the flow. And rather than just I thought I'd have a go, so that's what I came up with. If you remember, I was talking about the feather. This is the shape of water, just a flow from your kitchen tap, just hitting a brass sheet that I'd cleaned using Brasso, so there's an oily surface on there. But it shows you the flow of the water as it did around the edge of the feather, which is spinning all the way around. That's spinning that way and that's spinning that way. And you'll notice they don't touch. I thought they sort of blended here or joined together like rope, but they don't. They bounce off and come back together and rotate around each other. It's like a rope. It's just like making a rope, ropes of water. That's how it works. But it also remind me of the top of the ankh, so I don't know what that means. You put a little cross on here, get a bit closer. This is the classic shape that I was mentioning before, which is the kudu horn. So the water spins, and as it spins, it's carefully, because of the shape of it, it's done one rotation to here, then it does another rotation to here. When it does that, by the time it going out of there, this water volume reduces to that self-accelerates, and that's coming out at a high rate of knots. And he harnessed them, and he was he didn't develop this straight on his own, but he understood the principles. And when Germany, when the war started, Second World War, the Nazis said to him, because they'd heard about Schauberger, work for us, we're going to hang you and all your family. So it wasn't much of a deal. So he said, okay. And they developed this. They had a 2-hour interview with Hitler. When he came out, even though money was tight, I can't remember the purse strings guy in the Second World War with Hitler, but he said, give this man everything he needs to get done what he needs to get done. So Schauberger did a deal with him. He said, yeah, okay, I'll work with you, but anybody who works with me has got to be working under good conditions, not under duress. And we're not quite sure everything that happened, or it's hidden in the bowels of history, but they did come up with various instruments, and this was one of them. It sounds incredible, but if it's built right, that's a 20 centimeter disc, 20 centimeters, spinning at 20,000 RPM, generates what's called a levitational force. And it's called levitation, it's not, it generates a levitational force of 228 tons. So what do you need a helicopter for? You'll have one of these, thanks. But if you remember at the beginning, I was talking about hot and cold energies. And we've got two sides, two ends of the stick, and in the middle is 0 point. And also the fourth law of thermodynamics, don't mess with the top three, you want to get your funding next year. Because what they don't want you to have is any knowledge of the cold running side. Because if you go on the cold side, that's the feminine energies. As we go into the Aquarian age, it seems very appropriate. But the other thing is it self-runs. It does not destroy its own fuel. It runs silent, it self-accelerates, and you actually have to brake those forces, B-R-A-K-E, slow them down. So what you need is a big generator on there, and then you're off-grid. If you're off-grid, then there's no hot nuclear, there's no hot engines, there's no hot ice engines, you don't need them. That's why they don't want you to have that, because it's decentralization. So if we're unplugged and we've got free energy, then we can, you don't need that club in London, do you, with the clock, much. I'm just setting this off because something Tesla said. He said electricity is incompressible. And that sounded to me like it's running like a fluid. And this is a design by John Bedini in the States, who worked with Tom Bearden. Tom Bearden worked in the Black Ops and all the hidden secrets, if you like, and all the different topics, wonderful books they've written. So this is one of the very simple circuits that John Bedini came up with, because he's a bit like the Nazis. The Nazis wanted to build craft that would move around, that didn't have wings and weren't lighter than aircraft. They wanted them to float gravitically or electrogravitically because they knew it was possible, because they didn't have those laws in that box. So they chucked them out and they put anything in that would work. So they went to India and found the Vimanas. They also had Madame Blavatsky and the Vril Society, who were remote viewers and channelers and accessing all kinds of information. They knew from other areas that there were certainly things that floated using particular technology, which is called now electrogravitics. And so the stuff we see floating about, I don't know what ratio is, but probably half is terrestrial and the rest's from other places, for all I know. But it is possible, is without a doubt. But my thinking actually is, I don't know if anybody's read Hunt for Zero Point. Anybody read that? Nick Cook's book? Hooray!
The character Dan Marcus in Hunt for Zero Point, he left about 2 hours ago, the guy who advised the journalist who wrote the book.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to have met him.
She was here, yeah.
I'd love to have met him, because I had so many questions for Nick, because he wrote the book, and in the book he talks about zero-point energy, all kinds of different ways, and what the Egyptians were up to. I don't know if you mentioned Edward Leeds Skalnin in Coral Castle, but there was a few people around. If you haven't heard these names, you can look them up, because they're all working with unconventional physics, really. I.e., that's the physics you're not allowed to learn about. It's the other end of the stick. But Nick, in his book, he goes into some detail about all these different devices and all these things we've discovered down time that we don't have. Obviously, we've been paying for it, but we don't have them. And he mentions Schauberger at the end, and he's saying he's really boosting Schauberger in the book. And he did a TV prog about 4 years ago for Byde 2, I think it was, which was really well produced. And he's travelling all over the desert and going to all these places and talking about it. But he doesn't mention Schauberger once. He doesn't even mention Implosion in the film. And that's what, as far as I'm concerned, it's all about, the generic term. But you can read about it here, what this does. Interestingly, nobody's been able to replicate this. And what some of the thinking is, there's something missing, something essential missing from this design. We don't know what, we're not sure what it is. It might be the fluid that it runs in or what. But it uses several things. It uses temperature differentiation, so it'll be sucking cold water in from the bottom and warm air in at the top, and it comes in through it's pre-spun, and it comes through these slots, and then it goes over these rills as it's going around, and it accelerates the flow, so it's under a lot of torsion. You get, as I was saying before, if you're spinning something, the faster you spin it, the greater the charge separation. And if you can manage your charge separation, then you can get things to float, as they do with, I forgot which number plane it is, but if you charge the leading edge of a plane positive and the end negative, just because it's moving through the air, you can do it, although you can have a generator on board, like a bird does, and you get charge separation, then it'll fly easy. You'll save 60% of your fuel, apparently. And they haven't let us have that, because none of our commercial craft are managing the skin charge on the skin of the plane, not managing it. Of course, there's a charge there, but if you manage it, you float better. This is another device of his. It's called the it's called the Implosion turbine, and this is a isometric or a elevation of it. And what you've got, instead, conventional propellers are pushing. So as they're turning, they're pushing the boat through the water if it's a propeller on the back of a boat. And what you get is the stern goes down and the bow comes up, and you're riding up a wave of your own making. You might get on the plane eventually, in which case it's not so bad, but you're still using a lot of energy because you're always riding uphill. But if you stick one of these on, it's not pushing. That enters the water there like a spoon. So you're introducing the water like a spoon. I don't know if you ever played when you're doing the washing up. I used to. I was doing it all the time as a spoon. The water would fold in there and it would spin out down there. I used to watch it. It was great, you know. Never got any washing up done. I was playing. And I used to put a bowl in the bottom. And did you ever do this when you were a kid? You put a bowl in the bottom of the bowl and then spin it really fast, and the bowl comes up. And it gets to the top if the bowl's full and you get covered. Brilliant. Loved it. That's what I used to do anyway. He's washing up. All right, just this is the plan view of the top of this egg, a trout turbine, but it's on an egg shape, and you can see what I mean. The scoop, the water will come in here and spin down there, and as it spins, it gets faster. As it gets faster, the tube narrows, and it accelerates. The thing that's really hard to get your head around is that these are self-accelerating flows. When you get the shapes right, they self-accelerate. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And here's another interesting illustration of, let's talk about the hyperbolic, which is the shape the water makes when it's going down in your bathtub. Planes infinity to a point in infinity, it makes this shape. So you just keep dividing a string, and you join the dots, and you get a hyperbolic. I just thought I'd show you that. I don't know what it means, but it looks good. Now we're getting on to something. There's a load of stuff going on with Schauberger, really a whole shed load of stuff. They didn't like him conventionally. He was one of the groundbreakers. They were all trying to get at him all the time. His ideas on hydrology would put everybody out of a job, basically, because he's the only one who knew how to do it. So he actually approached Stuttgart University to do a test, and there was a professor there who we approached. It was in the Department of Hygiene. I don't know what it was in the Department of Hygiene, not the Department of Hydraulics, but anyway. And his name is Professor Franz Popel, and he said, will you test my pipes? And Popel said, no way, I'm not touching you with a barge pole. You're danger. But then the German government got wind of it, and they said, we'll fund half of it if you fund the other half yourself. So Schauberger stumped up the cash. And what he had to do is produce different shaped pipes. The standard test, if you like, was just a glass pipe. And the other pipes he produced are different variations of conical, straight, or twisted pipes. So you've got a conical pipe. This is made of copper, by the way. Material is very important. Obviously not made out of aluminium, but it's made out of copper. You like copper, and water likes copper for all sorts of reasons. So you've got to twist down this straight pipe, so the water would come in here and go that way, and another one with a different twist and different variations, or just a straight conical pipe. It'll all make sense in a minute, don't worry, stay with me. And here you've got a representation of the kudu horn in copper. So they ran this, and Popel took it on when he heard the German government was sponsoring the other half, so he was pleased to do it. So he ran the tests. So they had a very well set up system. When it's working. To back up, there we go. He ran the tests, I bet you wish he hadn't. Because this is the graph, this is the flow of water. Let's have a look, just have a look. What's that called? Usually, if this was a conventional graph, you'd have frictional losses up here, i.e. the faster the flow, more friction you're getting. Yeah, that's the standard maths for this, loss of head they call it. You've got a bunch of pipe, you've got a tank up there. What's your loss of head when you get to your radiator here, or whatever your section is here? That's called loss of head, or frictional losses. They sometimes. And here's the increasing flow. So you've got steadily increasing flow. It wasn't a huge amount. The pipes were only about this long. But it was all set up. They were all tested on a standard head, and so there was no variables other than the pipes. So this is the glass pipe, straight glass pipe. Increasing flow, increasing friction. Then he tried one of the copper pipes, and you get a little wiggle. Okay, we'll get away with that. And then another one. Then he tried one of the straight conical pipes with a twist on it, and they get more of a wiggle. It's looking a bit dodgy now. It's looking a bit dodgy. And then another one with another pipe, and now it gets very, 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 very dodgy, because this is the kudu horn. It goes up, it goes down. And actually the graph, which is the frictional losses, they had to change this actually to changes in suction and pressure here. They had to sort of Tipex out your loss of head and put change in suction and pressure, because they couldn't figure this one out. And at this velocity, it drops there, goes up even steeper at that point than the glass one. But what happens here? It shouldn't do that. It shouldn't do that. And Professor Franz Popel was really upset about this in his report, because that is... Do you know what that point is? Negative friction. Hey, well, that's a good phrase. I like that. I don't know what to call it. So negative friction's excellent, isn't it? Isn't that brilliant? It doesn't give the game away because it's got friction in it. We call it negative friction. We won't call it over unity or 0 point, will we? Well, it's a dirty word, that. You know, boys learned our next. You know, won't get you funding next year if you talk about that point there. No funding next year if you talk about that there, right? So, actually, he didn't get his pipes back after this experiment, and they cost a lot of money to get manufactured, as you can imagine. And here's another bit of the graph, and then we've got output. This is the speed, the velocity in the water, just going up steadily there. And these are the frictional losses, suction and friction. Tricky now, isn't it? Straight glass pipe going up to 7.3. Straight copper, and the spiral helicoid, which is the same as the kudu horn, here. And there's your result. Don't worry, we haven't put any negatives in there. It's just 0, so you're okay. All right? can't mention there's nothing there, you know. It's going. I mean, how do you do that? It shouldn't happen, should it really? Not if conventional physics is to be believed. Hands up who believes conventional physics. Yeah? Must be some here. In certain circumstances. I like that qualification. Oh, I'll just show you something while we're doing this. We'll have a bit of interactive, bit of interaction here with some bits and pieces. Sorry. How do I do this? I should have one of these other mics here. Let's think about this. We landed men on the moon, 50 years ago, and we haven't sorted out floaty about things yet, like levitational craft. I'll just show you a little experiment here. There's nothing down this pipe, all right? I'll hand it around, you can have a look. There's nothing down this pipe, we'll just prove it. I'm just going to drop something down it, all right? It's a bit of stone from outside. Acceleration due to gravity, apparently. So I'm going to drop something else down it. This is one I made earlier. All right, you ready? Shouldn't do that really, should it? But, it's floating down there, isn't it? Have a go. Hand it round. Please have a go, a bit of interaction here. Here's your test piece. This is to make sure there's nothing in there. Drop that down first and then drop that down. If you can, look down the top as it's going, keep it vertical. It's a very powerful magnet called a neodymium, or rare earth magnet. And it's worked in a very simple way.
Is it a copper tube?
Yeah.
So a magnet shouldn't work with it, right?
Yeah, but what it does is it's generating, they call it back EMF, it's generating a field counter to the magnet, but it'll only work as long as the magnet's falling, so it's still going to generate, I think they call it the lens effect, something like that, if you want a posh word for it. But it's great fun, it's great fun. But the point about that is if I can get that, as somebody can get that to float down there with a bit of copper tube and a magnet, what can you do with an unlimited budget in 50 years? Especially if you've got a flying start. There's a few things I like to say about this, because I think this is quite a bit of a mystery. I mean, in all of the books, Nick mentions it. He mentions the Glock and the bell at the Wenceslas mine, where they had massive investment in infrastructure, because what they were experimenting with is to do with that and other things, which is negating gravity, you might call it, or gravity modification. Keely was doing this because he could make things either get lighter or heavier, so they're either floating or sinking relative to our gravity. So it's not fixed. But you need a huge investment to do that, and what better way to get a huge investment than have a war? Because what you can do when you've got a war is you don't have to tell Congress, you don't have to answer to anybody. You can just draw in resources and brains from the whole of Europe to find out, solve problems, turn them into slaves, whatever it is you want to do. And so I think out at the Wenceslas mine, they found a lot of things, because when you experiment with gravity, you also experiment with other things like time dilation and stuff like that. So after the Second World War, the Allies, this is the story, knew about some of this stuff, so they had advanced troops that went in ahead of the main guard once they'd invaded in Europe, and they were cherry picking. The Russians got to Schauberger's flat first, took what they wanted and just blew it up. But there was other stuff there, and there were other deals done, I feel certain, because there's von Braun went off to, and all the rest of his cohorts went off to America, and they were still dealing with hot technology. They were all dealing with the repulsive rockets, I call them, because they're working by repulsion, the chemical, bloody fireworks. And that was all watch the birdie. So you got hot nuclear, which we got the H-bomb, and we got hot rockets. And they said, use this, you'll be able to go to the moon. In the meantime, they nicked off because the Nazis didn't, what's it called when you're beaten? What is it you do? Capitulate, give up. The Nazis didn't give up. The German people did. Sorry?
Surrender. Surrender,
that's the word. The Nazis didn't surrender, the German people did. So the Nazis went off and, we've got what we've got now, I guess, because they now had two major bits of technology. They've now got electrogravitic craft. If they've got electrogravitic craft, they've got zero-point energy. Zero-point energy means you can set a generator up anywhere you like, crank the handle, and it just keeps turning. forever, or until your bits wear out. But there's other people who are working on this as well, like the Searle effect generator. John Searle's working on spinning magnets. And if you're ever working with this or you ever come across it, there's several things you'll notice. It'll probably run cold, it'll run silent, and it will not destroy its own fuel, which is like a weird thing to say because we've been told if you're on the hot end, the other thing about the hot end is you've got to keep filling up the tank. And somewhere along the line, you've got to have a meter. Because I don't know if you know the story of Tesla when he was building Wardenclyffe, and his sponsor was J.P. Morgan. And he got a lot of investment. We know he's all having a go with Edison and all the rest of it. Edison was DC, and Tesla was AC, polyphase current, alternating current, which is what we've got now, which is about 52 cycles a second. And for one thing, 52 cycles is not a good frequency for the human body. As we were learning the other day about the solfeggio tones, it would be better if it was in the 60s. That would be far better for us, but I think they knew that. They've known a lot about frequency, because the other thing is, I think it was Goebbels who decided on what was concert pitch, which was 440 hertz. And the Egyptians talk about this, or we're led to believe they are, but I don't think they're right. I think it's 432 is a better frequency, 8 hertz difference. If they're out of sync, there was a Chinese emperor, and he had employed people just going around his empire to make sure they're on one frequency, 432. He didn't care whether they were playing rap or symphony, so long as they're on that frequency. And the reason was, if you're on that frequency, 432, you're coherent. If you're all playing different tunes on the wrong frequency, we're incoherent, and you get war. Coherence, incoherence. It kind of makes sense to me. So that's why those frequencies and higher frequencies are very important. So some are very conducive for our bioorganism and some aren't. That's what we get more sensitized towards. But when you move things in the right way, I mean, for example, in our ICE engines, internal combustion engines, they're all running hot. They're all hot running engines, atmospheric engines, I call them, but they're hot running engines. And what they produce is deadly orgone fields. If you've studied Wilhelm Reich, anybody know Wilhelm Reich? Hooray! And he talks about two sorts of orgone. Good orgone and deadly orgone. When you run your engine hot, suck, squash, bang, blow, then it's producing an energy field which is deadly orgone. Bad. That's why we're quite sick. Schauberger said this, unless you get the shapes right and the fluid movement right and manage your rivers, you're going to get cancer. More and more cancer. Because that's the way it works. And that's why we've got it. But there's some people who are using his ideas. This is a very simple illustration, apart from the sophistication of the UFOs, which you can talk about in a bit if you want. And this is a guy called Zotlotere. Zotlotere, yeah, that's what I call him. And this is working tangential water injection, if you want to flow. We call it a flow rather than injection. So it's coming in at a tangent, it's not coming in square. So you're encouraging a spin, and at the bottom, the outlet, you've got a hole. So that water spins round, drops through the hole. And the shape of that, again, is the hyperbolic. So that's how that flows in. He's stuck a simple turbine blade in there, and he pulls out a power plant 50,000 kilowatts hours. Sounds like a lot to me. And all he's using, instead of most of our technology, we say we've got to dam up the water, get a high pressure, and then put a high-pressure turbine in there. And when that water in our conventional turbines goes through that high-pressure turbine, it chops the water. It doesn't only chop it, it cavitates it and sucks and it destroys the energy structure in the water. It takes about 2-3 miles downstream for the energy to build up. If you remember the earlier shapes of the inwinding flow of the river, the lemniscate, that's the dance that builds energy. If you chop it, you kill it. You kill the energy. This way, you've got what's called a low head turbine. You've just got probably 5 feet drop, and you're pulling out all that power. So you have one on one side of the river, one on another. Build them that way. And that way, there's no destruction of the subtle energies in the water. It's conducive to life. The high pressure turbines, again, because they're a cavitation screw, destroy life, destroy energy. And what we're interested in, what the river does naturally, is build up energy. Well, Schauberger used odd terms because there weren't any in physics, hadn't been invented yet. He called it bioelectricity and biomagnetism. He also talked about descending heat and rising cold. And he asked this, he said, well, if hot air rises, why is it cold up a mountain? So his view is very unconventional. This is just a sectional view of the Zodler Terra low-head turbine, and he's made it commercially, and other people are copying what he's done. But it's a very simple system. The other thing is it allows fish to come up through it, and it won't chop them to bits. So it won't kill them. Yeah. Any questions on that? Or no? Why is that still spinning?
Is there some electromagnetic force keeping it going?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all right. You've probably seen pictures like this before, but these are different resonance or resonating patterns and self-organizing patterns, which are quite pure, from the study of Cymatics or the Chaldean plates or piezo transducers, however you care to vibrate things. But it's illustrating standing waves, and so nodes and antinodes. And if you do it on a big scale, you get don't have a gadget. That is Giza, and these resonances are going out. Now I don't know if Giza was built there because they knew the nodes were there, or whether they've built Giza to create the node there, but that's pretty much Giza. This is after research done by Alexander Putney in human resonance. Human resonance, not the Schumann resonance. Although it's using the Schumann resonance, but if you were using the Schumann resonance, even 1.5 or 2 cycles a second, and you had a steady pulse from that point, this is the ideal shape you'd get in a uniform structure. This obviously the Earth isn't a uniform structure, so you get different patterns. But where they cross over, they've noticed very interesting effects. Like over in America, you've got floating rocks. And what this is to do with is, well, I think it's to do with the piezoelectric effect. I don't know if you've got any lighters that don't have a flint, and you just press or compress the crystal that's in there, you get a little electric spark. So if you get a standing wave in a crystalline structure like granite or dolomite limestone, you've got cubic miles of piezoelectric effect, and then you get very odd electrogravitic effects above it, like floating rocks. So there's pictures way out in the sticks in America, no roads, no nothing, of rocks weighing 3 or 4 tons stuck in the branches of a tree. And they've also got strange effects in China and Italy. They're all on nodal points to do with these nodes and antinodes, with spontaneous fires, mobiles bursting into flames, and they get the local priest in to get rid of the demons. But that's the reason why. That's what I think, anyway, to do with resonant frequencies. This is just another bit to show you the shapes, the maths of it. This is all from the Pythagora-Kepler Schule, which is in Austria, which is really the museum for Implosion, or Victor Schauberger's work. And his son did a lot of the work on the maths. This is interesting because this is the shape of the hyperbolic both ways. So wherever you go, if you go off there, that's equal to 1. If you go off there to there, that's equal to 1 in volume. So it always adds to 1. So if it's on there, there's a very simple way you can work it out. 1 over n times n equals a constant. So a half times 2 equals 1. A third times 3 equals 1. Always adds up to 1. But you build up. If you do the third and the 3 on, do the third on the x-axis and the 3 on the y-axis, you'll gradually build up this curve. So it's very simple maths. And somebody's done a very artistic thing for, this is William Pye and Charybdis up in Scarborough. That's huge. That's about 6 feet across, that perspex cylinder, to show how the hyperbolic works. I was talking about resonance earlier. My slides got a bit mixed up, but in this one, you've got a wave moving through the medium, and that's either water or the earth. In this bit, you've got the water moving through the wave. It's quite subtle, really. Kind of messes with your mind. But that's the wave moving through the fluid, and that's the fluid moving through the wave. So you can have a standing wave. Like I was saying, this ripple effect going out from Giza, you get a standing wave at different places, which is compression, then you get strange effects above the rock. And I mentioned that, so they talk about these anomalous things. They're not very well advertised, but if you've got rock floating, there's a reason for it, because it's too far for helicopters to go, so how'd it get up there? And these some other pictures. The ancients carried a lot of their fluids around in amphora, which is an elongated grain shape, which you can see here, and they found thousands of these on the bottom of the Med. And these guys weren't stupid, but it would seem to me if you're going to transport a fluid, you can put it in a square box, wouldn't you? Because then you can stack it. You can't stack these. In fact, you need another piece of kit at the base, which is a box with straw in it, to set them upright. So they must have had a very good reason why they wanted their fluids in a shape like that, oils or water. And the thing that holds energy the best is the egg shape. So if you want to look after your water, get energized spring water and keep it in a biscuit-fired egg, which people produce now. Centre for Implosion Research, not far from here, make them. And a few other people do as well. And the reason why they work is the water goes through the biscuit firing and evaporates, so you have a temperature differential. And inside, you get a circulation a bit like this. So it's winding round. It's not exactly like that. I don't suppose many of you know Mike Emery, but he's talking about the anu, and that's the shape of the anu, which where you go from 2D to 3D. This is the shape of creation. That's what I think, for another talk. This is another picture I made, again showing charge separation. These are two opposing jets, and that's only about a 6-inch by 4-inch sheet. So there's a 1 millimeter jet there, another there, and that exposure took about 30 hours. The water's still on there. I took that picture because it's so pretty. And you've got a rope moving through here. Oh, just amazing picture. Other stuff. Yeah, and make sure you got that switched on, of course. Because you're a wise man if you know the truth when you hear it, and if you can sort out an agenda from a conspiracy, you're also a wise man. And these are some of the other shapes that Showie came up with. I just called that the yin-yang. He was experimenting with flows. So that's an intake, so it starts to spin and it goes out away from you down another pipe, spinning. Same here. So he went to a lot of trouble to develop these shapes. And these are all, when you get the shapes right, self-running machines. Running means once you've set them going, they go forever. I mean, this one doesn't, but we'll talk about that in a minute, as it is. But this one, when it was built, apparently went forever. And there was one that was commissioned. I can't remember who built it, but it was around the Second World War. And it was bolted down with 6 quarter-inch steel bolts. And somebody was told to leave it alone, but some bugger came along, an apprentice, and set it going. And it sheared all 6 bolts, and they never saw it again. There was a hole in the roof, and that was it. It's gone. Apparently, so the story goes. I like it, but I wasn't there. It's just hearsay. Anyway, my slides are a bit mixed up, but I was telling you about Chester, Frank Chester, which I recommend you look up on YouTube. Just put in Frank Chester. This is the 6th platonic solid which he's developed. He doesn't call them solids because they're not. It's just to help us get our head round the shape, if you know them. There's the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, icosahedron, dodecahedron, and of course the Chesterhedron. He was from the Steiner School, and he's a sculptor, and it's just so worth looking at that, because that's the shape it's to do with the shape of the heart, or at least the left ventricle, how it's working. I think any heart surgeon should study his work, because they'd probably get on a lot faster. That's cast in copper because he's a sculptor. And these are just some other shapes, or the development of shapes. Really, straight line, triangle, tetra. Don't know what that shape is. And you can see the build-up, whether the molecules or cells. Yeah, I was talking about birds earlier, but how they fly and how they manage, not only how they manage their lift is to do also with charge separation. If you can manage your charge separation, then you can float. Then all you got to do is row. And if you ever, I don't know if you ever watched everybody's seen a housefly, and you know for a fact there's one housefly in that room. It's been there forever, which you can't catch. So a week later you go there, it's still flying around. So where's it getting its energy from? How is it doing it? Now, if it was waiting to convert calories or fat to energy to flap its wings all the time, it would have been out of there ages ago. What it's doing is managing vortices and charge separation on its body. And its body's made of, well, nature uses cellulose and keratin, or chitin. Chitin's what, in different combos, is what the skins of insects are made of, and their shells. And it's a dielectric. So if you get your charge right and you've got lots of vortices, you'll fly. And we all know the story of the bumblebee, which they say, scientists say, it can't fly. Shouldn't do that, but we know it does. And the reason it flies is they don't understand the aerodynamics of the vortex. Well, maybe they do now. I might be speaking out of my head there, but that's how it's working. It's managing vortices. I'm just putting these in because they're to do with resonance, and this is work by Dr. Champion. I don't think I spelt that right. It's probably missed an A out. Bit of a hurry there. But if you look at Dr. Champion and LENC, what he's doing is he's got a special autoclave. Well, it's a bit like a microwave, again with frequency, and he's converting copper to gold. So he's just vibrating. He heats the copper up, and then he bombards it with a particular frequency, and the electrons jump a shell, put in copper, get out gold. And he's selling it. So we can have our gold back. We can have our gold back currency back, can't we? But if you can make it that cheaply, what's it worth? It's cracking, isn't it? But you know, it's about resonance, so we're jumping around a bit here. But Schauberger just said comprehend and copy nature. So this is all the maths that his son's done in the again from the Pythagoras Kepler Schüler, and they do all kinds of magical things. People make make all kinds of gadgets out of it, and if you've got this shape on a screw, you can move live fish without destroying them, and you know, they get wound in and they don't get squished. Or you can use it to energize fluids, or you can use it as a fluid mover. I just think it's a beautiful design because you can see how Mother Nature does it, and you've got this nice wiggle in the middle and the cells going around the outside. It's just superb. Love it. We'll have to end fairly soon. And some more. And that's one of his repulsins there. Look familiar at all? Wonder where he got that from. Seen one of them. But this is really interesting. This is a Russian entomologist called Grebennikov, and he developed something called cavity structure effect, or shape power, but cavity structure effect. And being an entomologist, oh, all right, yeah, there's etymology, study of language, entomology, study of insects, yeah. He was studying his insects. He was Russian, and he had various nature reserves. One time where he was examining the carapace, we think it was the mayfly, we were not sure, under a microscope, he had two sections, both, you know, one wing and one the other, but small, and he rotated one piece and it floated. And he rotated it again, it went invisible. So he made fans of these, like expanding fans. When he twists one, it opens the fans, and when he twists the other, it tilts it, so he moves forward. So here's the famous picture of him on the ground, and here's the famous picture of him off the ground. But he's written, there's a book written, it's hard to get hold of, but it's probably in Rex Research. If you have a look for Grebennikov, it'll be in Rex Research, all the studies he has done on cavity structure effect, honeycombs, and a whole bunch of stuff to do with treating illness, headaches, all kinds of things. And it sounds a lot like Wilhelm Reich's stuff to do with orgone accumulators and other energetic systems. That's not dealing with conventional physics. I don't know if any of you heard of Dan Winter, but he's also working on coherent flow, heart math, and he did a lot of his work on Stan Tenon's work, which is the study of the Hebrew alphabet and the rotations of what he calls the grail, but it's a coil wrapped down your thumb, again on a certain frequency. When you look at that in different areas, you get 22 characters of the Hebrew alphabet. So what you're seeing in representation is different sectional views. Again, it's very like the hyperbolic, of different structures in the hyperbolic, which you then used as your language to describe energy. So if you understood this, and you could speak the language from the two-dimensional shape because you knew it represented a three-dimensional shape, of sound, then you could bring down the walls of Jericho, or maybe build them back up, for all I know, but that's the way I think about it, because that's what our language is. It's energetic, and it's designed on shapes. And we've had ours probably chopped up a bit. The Hebrew alphabet's a lot of curves, it's on a very particular shape. Ours is very angular. I think it was designed to be cut in stone or wood, for all the good it is to describe energetically how you can do stuff. But anyway, this is about coherence, and this is Dan Winter's work. And the water's rotating one way, and this is a water nozzle that's about that big. But they're getting tremendous results with increased flow, increased growth in plants, just because what you're doing is actually, the water you're pulling in, is you're wiping its memory. We know water has a memory. Does everybody know that? I don't know if you do, but the study of Benveniste on homeopathy. Benveniste was a French scientist, and he was commissioned, I think it was by Nature magazine, to do a report on homeopathy. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he said water has a memory. It's got a subtle memory, so everything it flows over, it has a memory of. So, I mean, it has a gross memory to do with chemicals, as we know about the water in London, and growth hormones or plasticizers that emulate the female growth hormone. But it also has a subtle memory. So if you want to know what you're putting in your body, you've got to get rid of that subtle memory, and the way to do it is to spin it through a vortex, spin it really fast. And also Dan Winter here is using magnets, powerful magnets, which increases, it changes the quality in the water, and when it goes through this coherent flow, and you then use it to water your plants, they reckon they're getting a third as much growth compared to ordinary, any other water with this. And it's all built on recursive geometries. The icosahedron's in there, the flower of life's in there, it's fractal, and it's pretty much the perfect flow. But I mentioned Stan Tenen because a lot of the work in here on the shapes is reflected in Stan Tenen's work, or the Maru Foundation, but Dan Winter never mentions it. But he's gone on to do amazing stuff now. If you want to have a look, just putting Dan Winter on YouTube and look at some of the stuff on there, like the eggs files, that's bloody brilliant. He's a clever bloke. This is design using how you could use some of Schauberger's ideas. What I forgot to mention about that trout turbine, I don't know if you remember it earlier, I talked about this trout turbine, the scoopy stuff, you know? When you stick that on your boat, instead of it climbing up a wave of its own making, it'll now fall into a hole of its own making because it's working on suction rather than pressure. So instead of your boat climbing up the hill, it's now doing that, and it'll go very fast. And this is using a similar principle, but it's more to do with air turbine than water. But you could use it in water, and you can read that and see how it's working. I love this picture. Don't you love this picture? I think it's great, that. When did they build them? Eh? Do you think they built them? Is this just a cartoon? Any ideas? Anybody? Did they build? Do you think those exist?
Maybe.
Yeah? What's the vote? Does it exist? Is that just a cartoon? Do you think there's any like that anywhere on the planet? Anything that resembles that? I think there is. I think there is. They talk about disclosure now. There's a whole bunch of them, isn't there? There's David Wilcock. All of them are talking about disclosure. Like they're going to wait for Obama to say, "Yeah, we've been visited." They came over in the 50s and had a chat with Roosevelt. Whoever they are. I mean, we're seeing them flying around all the time, but nobody's coming down to rent us one or sell us one. But anyway, whatever's going on upstairs in that regard, not too bothered. They'll arrive if they arrive. But if they admit disclosure, then they've got to admit we've been visited by beings outside of Earth, which is reasonable, the aliens, whatever you want to call them. The next question is, how'd they get here? And they say, well, 747 Boeing? What do you reckon? Flew here? And if they did fly here, how'd they get here? So if they got here using, they're coming from a long way away, so obviously they've got a bit of wormholeage, or they're coming in a mothership and then they're coming off that, and they're flying around, and They're floating. So they're floating. So they've got anti-gravity, bad term, I know, gravity differential displacement, floatiness. And then you'd say to them, when did they arrive? And 50 years ago, 60 years ago? So if they arrived 60 years ago and we've had that technology, or they've had that technology for 60 years, then they've got 0 point. If you can make something float, you can raise water for nothing and let it run back down through a turbine. So they've had 0 point energy and anti-gravity for 50 years. And then the politicians have got to figure out how they're going to tell us they've been lying for 50 years and why we're still using petroleum, the black, gloopy, hot stuff, when we know we've got 0 point. I mean, we're not going to want them much. The other thing, of course, as I said earlier, if you go into the cold side, which is the implosive side, which does lead you to electrogravitics, then there's no meters. If you've got no meters, then you've got decentralization, and you've got that magic word, free. Like free man, free energy. Yes, I'm here. Free will. Will is innocent. And then you don't need that club down in London with the big clock anymore, because what are they good for? We just don't need them. And they know that, but as long as we're on centralized hot nuclear and hot oil, and then of course they can tax you again, or get some more of your self-worth again, because they say it's your fault you're warming up the planet through the carbon that's burnt in the oil we've just sold you, even though you don't need it. It's a good trick. I think it's more like terraforming. Well, I'm nearly done. Anyway, that shaper said earlier, that's what I call God's mill. It's fundamental shape. You can have a galaxy, you can have an atom, if you want to call it that. But I don't think they're working that quite that way, the way you say about electrons and atoms and stuff. But I was reading something just before I came here, which was a bit of a mind blower, which is basically the speed of light is 0, and we're the condensate. So you can think about that one on the way home. That's kind of inverts your physics. But anyway, that's God's mill. I'm about done. I'll just have a quick chat about this thing. It's called the Bedini, made by John Bedini, who developed it. He's gone on to some fantastic stuff. He's got free energy devices, if you want to call them that. He's got a 10 coiler. It costs you about £2,000. But the reason I built it is I reckon it's cavitating electricity. If you cavitate electricity, you've got to fill a vacuum. You get, where does the energy come from? It comes from the vacuum. So energy from the vacuum. And what you're going to use is radiant energy. Then you go into torsion fields and scalar waves, and Tom Bearden's done all that. But you're using a different physics than the one we've been given in our textbooks. You know, as Ike says, you're just repeating the same old crap, and it is. So anyway, that's what that's about. And I could go on forever, but any questions? Good? What? Oh, do you want this, or do you have that, or what is it? What?
Okay. Thank you for a whistle-stop tour through Schauberger and some really interesting areas covered. There's 1,000 questions in my head I'd like to ask, but I'll go with one about water purification. And I'm quite interested in purification of water for human consumption, but also for growing. And I'm quite interested in the fact that Schauberger was a contemporary of Steiner, and apparently they had lots of conversations, or a few conversations at least. I just wondered, particularly thinking about your bullshit detector, I've seen lots of stuff on the market about purifying water, making it healthy. I wonder if you could highlight one or two technologies that you think are really worth looking at.
I think you can do it quite simply, because if you look at nature, a high mountain stream is energized. Now you can buy mineral water and stick it in a nice container, but if you douse it, which some people have done, you'll find it stagnant. So you've got to spin it really. You've got to put vortices in there. You can do, you know, as Emoto's done, you can put an intention in that area, whatever you want to do. But if you want to increase the fertility in something that's repeatable, then you've got to go down the route of downwinter. But you can do it yourself, even if you just got a copper pipe with a vein in that spins the water before it hits the plant, and it makes a droplet, not a straight spout of water. It's got to be droplets, because they'll come out and spin, and as they spin you get the charge differentiation that the plants love. Because I don't know if you've ever seen them, but we know nitrates are fixed in the air due to lightning, but also it's a charge separation when that water hits the leaf. So you can do that. I mean, if you want to purify it, you can activate charcoal, you can have sand layer, a filter, and then as the water comes out the bottom, you can have it spinning. That'll energize it. and store it in an egg shape or a round shaped tank if you go on a, you know, if you want a reticulation system. Anyway, that's the way I do it. You can do it very simply. Just as long as you're spinning it before you use it, you're good to go, really. And use copper. Don't use aluminium. Don't use iron. If you're using iron, Schauberger did a lot of research on this, but he recommended copper. And you get an increase in fertility if you use copper for various reasons. So I made a copper trowel, and that's what I use my digging with. If you're using iron-based equipment, you'll put small amounts of ferrous material into your soil, which oxidizes, and the oxidized material will drive moisture away from that area. It also damages a very subtle electromagnetic field on the surface of the Earth. And slugs are copper-based, so they're blue bloods, and they detect this. And one of the things that we reckon they're designed to do is repair this damage. So more damage from your iron, more slugs, and they get hungry. So if you don't damage your soil and use copper tools, you get less slugs. So you've got to test this. You divide a bed and do one half with one thing and one half with another. But yeah, spin and copper tools.
What about
Drinking water, well, if you're using tap water, let it stand for 6 hours. That's what I do, because chlorine's put in as a gas, so it comes out as a gas. So let it stand overnight and keep it in a ceramic pot, and then stir it before you drink it with an intention. But if you can get the water, the best water would be a naturally a spring. There's springs. The best spring water rises high in the mountains, and there might be two springs. One will run during the day, one will run at night. Or if there's one spring, at the top of it will be covered. The head of the spring will be covered. If you uncover it and expose it to light, it stops running. But that is fantastic water. If you drank a litre of that, you wouldn't weigh a kilo more. You'd weigh 800, 900 grams more, because the rest goes to energy in every cell. And that's wetter water. It has a low surface tension. It's easy to get through the cellular membrane, but it converts directly to energy. Then you've got to go into some of the chemistry with the hydrogen bonds and all the rest of it. But there's some subtler things are going on there. It converts directly to energy. That's the best water. That would be rejuvenating water. So Schauberger talked about mature water that had gone in through the womb of the Earth and risen back to the surface of its own accord, and not an artesian spring. It floats back to the top, and that's a spring. So that's mature water. Juvenile water would be distilled water, and you don't want to drink that, because through osmosis it'll suck all the salts out of your body. So what you want to be drinking is an electrolyte with all the minerals in, ideally. Cheers. Thank you very much. There you are. There you go.